Yes, please.
Okay, so it's now 7, so we'll get started with our webinar. I just want to say a huge welcome to everybody. Really great to have you join us as we discuss how children learn through play. So I will just go ahead. Before I actually share my slides, I'd like to offer you the opportunity, if anybody has any questions or comments to make, just put them in chat. And Sam will support me by keeping an eye out on the chat box. And yeah, we can cover any questions you might have. So feel free to post your questions. And also, if you've got any suggestions for future webinars, so any content or topics that you'd like us to cover throughout the rest of this year, we'd love to hear your suggestions. So thank you for that. And I'll just get started. So I hope that everybody can see my screen. We all good? Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's get going. So we're going to talk about the science of play and how children learn. You know, it's very often, and certainly historically, play was not valued as much as it is today for its for the value in the amount, the speed at which children learn and how they learn. We always thought that we had to teach, when in fact children are born learners. So if we provide the right environment for children to thrive, then they're naturally going to learn. So that's really the topic of our conversation here tonight. So play lays strong foundations for learning, because through play, children become learners, and we'll learn a bit more as we go through the next half hour. Love this quote from Albert Einstein, and that is, play is the highest form of research. I'm sure you've all seen that before, but I thought it was a timely reminder given our topic of conversation. So, and also we must quote T. Fariki. You know, the New Zealand curriculum is a world-leading curriculum for early childhood. So I thought this was really great quote from T. Fariki, which is, by asking questions, by interacting with others and devising theories about how things learn, and then trying them out and making purposeful use of resources. As children engage in exploration, they begin to develop attitudes and expectations that will continue to influence their learning throughout their whole lives. So if you ever doubted how important these formative years are, then you know what children learn about who they are, how they learn, and how their brain is wired actually impacts the rest of their lives. So it's a very important job we do here between us. And lessons, early childhood experiences have a big impact on how our brain develops, and as such can have an impact on the rest of our lives. And that's because, I mean, we're not going into the neuroscience of it tonight, but because the brain frequencies, particularly in the first 5 years, are that of more like a sleep frequency, children are literally, as Maria Montessori would say, children are literally incarnating the world around them. So very often children will have experiences in early childhood that will create a response, an automated response that can affect the rest of their lives. Think about something like people who have a fear of spiders, and often they don't know why they have a fear of spiders or a fear of clowns or dogs or whatever it might be. That's often either learned behavior from the parents or from an experience they've had when they've been in their preschool years that they can't even remember right now. But what they do carry with them is the effect of that experience. So that's probably a really, really simple example to explain how experiences in the early years can affect the rest of our lives. You know, and have a think about that for yourselves. What likes and dislikes or fears do you have that make no sense to you now as an adult? You know, maybe think about how they could have come about. Like for me, I'm really scared of cockroaches, and they can't harm me at all, so it makes no sense whatsoever. But my mum's scared of cockroaches. So even though I know I've probably picked that up from my mother, knowing that still doesn't help that irrational fear I have of cockroaches. So just have a think about what fears you have and what you might have incarnated from when you were under 5. So, and you know, when you think about the fact that 90% of our brain is developed by the age of 5, that's pretty mind-blowing. And neural pathways formed during this period form the foundations for all future learning. So it's at this stage in our life that we become learners, and we develop the dispositions and the ways of being and the attitudes, etc., that support our learning or otherwise. So, and oh, sorry, I've gone backwards. So if we look at brain development and we just go through this very simple diagram, the brain, the first part of the brain to develop is the brain stem. That's the part of the brain that comes directly from our spine. And it takes care of our automatic body systems. So it's the very first part of the brain to develop. Then we have the next layer of the brain, which is the part of the limbic system. So that's where we regulate emotions and where motivation sits, you know, all those internal drivers where we, if you compare us to other mammals, they have a similar system. They feel emotion, you know, they have fear, they have excitement, they have share lots of emotions that we share. And motivation too. So that's still part of the very primitive brain. But then, unlike many other mammals, we have a higher brain where we have the right brain and we have the left brain. So loosely speaking, the right brain is all about feeling, images, intuition, impressions, you know, the creative side of the brain. And the left brain is thinking, words, sequences, and facts. That's more the logical side. Now, this is only to communicate an idea. Anybody, and that's not me, but any brain expert will tell you that actually we don't just use our right brain and we don't just use our left brain. They're all working together all of the time, but it's just the dominant parts of these different parts of the brain take care of those feelings or thinking brain. So, and when you have the feeling brain and the thinking brain working really well together, then, you know, people are going to be more emotionally intelligent. So that's the key really for us to try and get those two parts of the brain working really well together for our children. So, and the brain develops from the brain stem outwards. So this is why many children struggle with managing their emotions and their feelings. It's because that part of the brain is not yet fully developed. So it develops from the brain stem, limbic system, then right brain, then left brain. So it makes sense, doesn't it, that children can't always make cognitive sense of some of the very powerful feelings that they're having, because the higher brain is still developing. Children experience life more through their emotional brain. And I'm sure every single one of you can come up with an example of where you've seen that play out. So if you think about, you know, the whole idea of the terrible twos, and yeah, toddlers struggling to regulate their emotions when things aren't going their way. And in fact, I'm sure you'll agree with me that some adults struggle too regulating their emotions. So it's no small task that children need to learn. And that same part of the brain is also responsible for those internal drivers like motivation and the play drive. So I think something to remember for all of us too is that all education is self-education. Now, a great way to think about this is thinking about language. You know, children learn language. Do we really teach it, or are children learning it because they're actually surrounded by an experience in language all of the time? So children, we don't have to tell children, like, you need to learn this now. They literally learn it because it's all around them. and they have a natural born drive and instinct to learn. So in that way, we don't need to educate, but we do need to provide the right environment in which children can educate themselves. Doesn't mean we don't play a part, far from it. We just need to make sure that children are in a safe, nurturing environment, and they have access to learning materials, access to rich language and diverse experiences. And I love this quote by Carl Jung: "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play experience." So if you think about play and the emotions around play and the drive, if you think about when you're in a creative state, when you're excited and you're motivated to actually do something, to participate in an experience, then you're going to be in a play state yourself, because you're open to possibility. You're not fearing failure, because when we're playing, there's no right or wrong, is there? When we're in the play state, we think, oh, well, let's explore this. It's with an open mind, no absolute expectation, and no fear of failure. So you're in a real great learning state when you're in that state of mind. And that's where a child's at when they're playing. So let's ask ourselves what play is. So it's the natural vehicle through which children practice skills, practice the skills and the values of their culture. Now, this is a quote from Dr. Peter Gray, who is an evolutionary psychologist. And some of the quotes and things I've covered in here are directly from his work. So he's looked at human evolution from a psychology point of view, but it links to a lot of what the psychologists and educationalists talk about as well. And that's understanding that actually play is a natural instinct. It's a natural driver, just like curiosity. So what we need to do is make sure there's no barrier to it, and children will learn naturally. And you'll see there are 4 characteristics of play. It's self-chosen and self-directed, so therefore children are motivated. It's intrinsically motivated, meaning they're motivated from within, and they initiate the play. So they're always interested and engaged, and if they're engaged, they're learning. It's always structured by the children, so the children have complete ownership and responsibility and complete control of what's happening. So they're far from a fear state, in fact, quite the opposite. And there's always an element of imagination in there too. So if we look at that from each of these characteristics, what are children learning from being self-directed in play? Well, they learn to make positive choices. So I'm sure many of you have been in a situation or know people that, that they find it really, really difficult to make a decision. Given 2 choices, which one shall I do? And it's, well, I don't really know. What do you want to do? How does it work for you? We want our children to be able to take action and to make positive choices for themselves, which links to their ability then to keep themselves safe in the future. Because learning to make positive choices, that choice can be it's also then just by virtue of knowing how to make a positive choice, they also know what's not right for them as well. So they understand that their actions have consequences. And you hear this all the time, don't you? Kindy justice. If I do this, then what's going to happen is that person's going to react this way, and they learn that maybe it's not such a good thing to go and whack somebody else over the head with something. So that's an important learning. Problem-solving skills. So to direct play and choose play, they're going to encounter problems along the way. So they're naturally going to be solving those problems from a hyper learning state, from a creative space, because they're relaxed and they're engaged. And of course, they're learning negotiation skills. So because play more often than not does involve other children. So, if I'm choosing to play a game, and I want to direct the play, then there has to be some kind of negotiation or agreement, whether it's a verbal agreement or just implied, with that other person who is in that engaging in play with me. And they learn to direct their own behavior and their own learning. So, again, that links back to their actions having consequences. It has emotional consequences, social and emotional consequences, as well as physical. So there's a huge amount of learning happening there. And then we look at play being intrinsically motivated and initiated. What do children learn from that? Well, they learn to take initiative. That's important. That's a real great skill in itself. They learn to lead their own learning. So they're not constantly needing to be told what to do. They can motivate themselves and they can actually take charge of situations, which promotes independence. So we all want our children to grow up as capable, competent learners and independent of thought. So play definitely offers those opportunities. And in that develops leadership capability too. And most importantly, through play, children develop the necessary dispositions for learning. So if you think about that, if play is intrinsically motivated and initiated, well, things are not always going to go their way. They will struggle sometimes through the play experience. They might want to build a tower 6 feet high and, for some reason it keeps falling down. If a child's experiencing that situation, then they need to learn to be resilient. So, when it keeps falling down, it takes resilience and persistence to keep building it up until they get it right. And they need to be motivated to persist through difficulty. And they need to be able to, use their creativity and imagination to be able to explore different options. All of these are positive dispositions for learning. And also play being structured by children. In that, children learn communication skills. They learn to create boundaries and structure. So, and that takes also linking back to the negotiation skills as well. They need not only to create the boundaries and structure, but they need to abide by the agreed rules and boundaries. That's sometimes the challenging bit for children, even though they may have created it in the first place, remembering to abide by those agreed rules. And if you think about how society works, that's a really important skill, because in society, certainly civilized societies, that we have boundaries and structure, and we do need to abide by them, even though at times it might feel inconvenient to do so. So that's a really important skill learned through play. And they learn to be able to negotiate or be open to the ideas and thoughts of other people. Now, that's a really important skill when you think about the work environment, or you think about being part of a family or part of a community. If our children can develop this skill, then they're going to be able to thrive in social settings, in work settings, and in the community in general. Which again links to developing social skills. And all play involves rules, whether they're implicit or explicit. All play involves rules. So for children to be able to follow structure and abide by rules, then it's an important social skill in itself. And when we talk about there always being an element of imagination, what do children learn from that? Well, they learn to take risks with their learning. And that is so important, because we can all be frozen by fear. Fear of failure can stop us moving forwards in our learning and in life. Emotional risks and physical risks and learning risks, it's all risk taking. And if we're not prepared to take that step and take a risk and maybe be a little bit vulnerable, then we're not going to grow and evolve and develop into our potential. So that's really, really important that children are able to do that. And they learn that failure's fun. through play, nothing's ever wrong. They're exploring possibilities. So in that case, failure is not threatening. And they learn to explore new ideas in a fun and relaxed way. And in that, they learn communication skills, because, if you think about children in the role play area, or, playing imaginary games with small world animals, then the opportunity to learn new language as they play with other children of maybe the same age or older children, and the opportunity for them to practice their communication skills are just so numerous. It's such a valuable opportunity. Also, through imaginative play, children learn to make sense of the real world, so they can act out experiences in a way that helps them make sense of it. So, and it can be fascinating watching children play in the home corner or imaginary play, because the things they come out with can be absolutely hilarious. I always said I'd make a book of all the things that children say, and I'm sure any of you with children, grandchildren, or any of you who are nannies or educators, you'll have had a whole host of really wonderful, amusing experiences with children as they practice their communication skills and as they make sense of their life experiences and the world around them. And they learn to collaborate, such an important skill. Many of these skills are necessary, have been identified by the World Forum as being necessary skills for future success and the future workplace. And of course, through exploration and understanding, they develop an understanding of their relationships with people, places, and things. So that is part of the curriculum in TFARIKI. So imagination underlines the highest form of human thinking, and imagination distinguishes us from other mammals. So the reason we're so evolved is because we have the ability to use our imagination. So then if we cover, So next, let's have a look at the components of play. So some of these we've talked about as we've just been discussing what play is, but the components of play are, am I still frozen, Sam? I've just got a message to say I'm frozen. Can everybody hear me? I'm just going to assume that I'm still okay. All good now. Okay, great. So let's take a look at the components of play. So curiosity. Curiosity is an internal driver. We shared before that children don't need to be told to learn. They are naturally curious. So that's what drives the playfulness. So curiosity sparks playfulness. And also primary tools of the culture. That's a component of play where children have an internal drive to learn about the primary tools of their culture. They have an internal drive to learn social play. They naturally gravitate towards other children, even if that's, we talked about how children play in early years. So, it could be they start by observing, then they might start to play parallel play, where they play alongside other children, but they don't play with them. And then as they grow and develop and they learn more social skills, then they start more social play. And then their play becomes a lot more complex as they develop then, into the more planning stage and being a lot more collaborative in the play experience. Okay, so again, Einstein. And I love this image. Sam, who's on this call, put these images together for me. I think that's really cute, real cool image, Sam. Thank you. So curiosity. So, we talked about this being one of the components of play. Here's a great quote by Einstein, which is, "I'm neither especially clever nor especially gifted. I am only very, very curious." And what child isn't very, very curious? So what we need to do is take that spark of curiosity and let the child guide us to wherever that interest takes them, because they do come into this world with a natural drive to learn, and that is led by curiosity. Playfulness is how children develop the skills they need to be a successful human being. So we were just talking about, role play, where children are making sense of their real world experiences and acting them out and reenacting and, talking with other children and engaging in play. So through that whole process, children's curiosity leads to knowledge, and the playfulness as they act it out and as they start to play with ideas and thoughts and using their imagination, that leads them to then develop the skills. So thinking about role play, they're developing the skills of the tools of the culture, because they're using maybe pots and pans and things like that, but also developing language and social skills as well. So we cannot underestimate how fast children gain knowledge, skills, and experience through play. And when we talk about the primary tools of the culture, right now, children are drawn to technology. So any of you with your phone or iPads or computers, for all of us, the young people in our lives are fascinated by them tools. And, even more so that very often they have amazing pictures and they're bright and they're shiny. And we seem to be very engaged and interested in the technology ourselves. So children are naturally drawn to that. It's like a natural instinct they have. So it's really important that children have access to the tools of the culture, because we are social beings, and having access to the tools of the culture builds our sense of belonging in that community, in that society, and as part of what we do as a culture and as a community. So historically it would be farm tools, etc. So still tools, pots, pans, all of these things are tools of the culture right now. Actually, a comment from Lorraine: often when her little ones are struggling with something, she's learned to sit on her hands and allow them to work it out themselves. Well done you, Lorraine, because that's so important. Very often we will try and solve the problems of our children by jumping in too soon. And what we're doing there is we're robbing them of the opportunity to work it out themselves. They might not work it out the way we do. Often they come up with a better solution, in fact, than we might do. And so the learning that children get from being able to persist through difficulty and maybe struggle with language, struggle with communication, but then find a way to communicate their needs to other children is so important. So where possible, it's always best, as Lorraine says, to allow children to work it out for themselves. Obviously, if it's going to become a full-on fist fight and children are really struggling, then you might step in and support them. But even in that support, you might ask them, you might intervene, you might coach them to come up with a solution themselves. How can we solve this problem? Do we have some ideas on what we can do next? So it's all too easy, like I say, to just jump in and solve it for them. So really good point there. Thank you for that, Lorraine. So just talking about tools of the culture, there's huge debate right now about should children be allowed on technology, and the threat that child protection threat that is posed towards children about using technology. So I'm not suggesting here that because iPads and computers are tools for the culture that we should just allow children to have them. Far from it. But I am saying that be aware that children are drawn to it. It is part of life now, and it's certainly going to play a bigger part in their future. So how can we give them access in a safe way? So it could be that it's with an adult present for limited periods of the day, because using technology is important. It's a skill that they need to learn. It is a tool for the culture, but it's very if children spend too much time on technology, it's robbing them of the rich learning opportunities that are provided through getting out into the environment, free play, and playing with and alongside other children and adults. So I don't want to get into the debate about technology because frankly, I don't know enough about it myself. Social play, that's another aspect of play as well. So we are the most curious and playful and most social animals, and we become educated through our sociality. So we were talking about that before with, role play is a perfect example, but any play where, children are playing imaginary play together, they're making sense of their world. If they're engaged in play with other children, then they are learning everything possible. They learn more. What I'm trying to say is, in a clumsy way, is children learn more from other children than they do from adults. And that is because they've all the skills that we've just talked about. And most of the learning comes from our sociality. And think about language. If you think about language, it's very easy to see how that would work. And of all the skills we've listed, the most important skill children need to learn as they get older is how to get on with other people, because we are expecting our young people to be adults that make a valuable contribution to society. So in order to do that, they need to at least have the basic skills and understand how to relate to other people. And in a future webinar, I think it's in 2 months, we'll be looking at children's natural temperaments and natural personality traits. So even the most shy or introverted child can learn these skills. So or adult indeed. So we're all social, even if some of us are a lot more reserved and maybe a lot more introverted, we're all social beings. So and planning. So we talked about that too. So in play, children are planning the activity and then they're following through. So in doing that, they're learning whether their plan worked and whether they need to adjust that plan. So they're taking cognitive control of their lives through the creative process. So they learn to make decisions, they learn to adjust their thoughts and ideas and learn to experiment. And in doing that, they're completely in control of where their play goes and what they do. So, and most importantly, through play, children learn about themselves. And that is the most important thing we can learn, to understand that we all have natural abilities, we have different interests, we have, different personalities. And it's really important that children, as they grow and as they learn what's amazing about them. Too often, adults are guilty of comparing children, and if you make comparison, one's going to come out less favorable than the other. And children too learn to make them same judgments about themselves. I want to be like my friend Jack because he's really fast runner. Well, supporting our children to learn about what they're great at is so important for them understanding as they get older what their natural passions is, which will lead to their purpose. And if children can learn early on what they're good at, then they're going to have more confidence to strive towards those strengths and find their passions and purpose, which is the key to future success. So it's really important that we support our children to learn about themselves and develop empathy for others, of course, but they can both go hand in hand. So that's me on play. I have gone a little bit over time. I'm sorry, everybody, for going a few minutes over. I just want to extend an invitation to anybody that's on this call. We have, across New Zealand, we have our play groups and forest schools happening all the time. So everybody's invited to them. Bring your friends, bring your family. You can go to our website to find out which events are happening near you and when, or you can email us at info@educationangels.co.nz, And if we've got nothing happening in your area, then you can go on our mailing list and we can let you know what's coming up. We also send out regular newsletters, and we also have our webinars, roughly about one a month. So we will have a webinar next month. So anybody who's interested, who's not had an email from us, then go to info@educationangels.co.nz and we can extend you an invitation to the next webinar. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending. For all of you who are here now on this webinar, we will be sending out a certificate of attendance to you, and also a free resource. So this month's free resource is recipes for sensory play activities. So that will be coming out to you via email with your certificate. So I think that will be in the next few days, Sam. Is that correct? So yeah, thank you all for attending. It's really, really great to have you here, and I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. And if anyone's got any ideas about what you'd like us to talk about, put them in before we jump off this call. Anything topical for you? I know behavior can sometimes be a hot topic. So just some ideas. Intentional teaching. Okay, we'll make a note of that, Sam. Cool. Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye.